All right. And I'll turn it over to Rilla for our introductions.
Thank you very much, Dione. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm glad, so on behalf of the Inclusive Technology Affinity Group, to welcome you all. The Inclusive Tech Group is an affinity group mentored by the Fung Institute, in which we analyze and reflect on how technology impacts businesses in terms of inclusiveness, diversity, integrity. And we're glad to organize this event today with XR Safety Initiative. Thank you to our panelists, April and Kavya, as well as Dione from Fung, who organized and host this event. Let me introduce very briefly XRSI as well as our panelists today. So first, about the XR Safety Initiative. It is a worldwide not-for-profit standards developing organization that promotes privacy, security, and ethics in immersive environments. XRSI's mission is to help build safe and inclusive experiences so that XR stakeholders can make informed and pragmatic decisions. XRSI does this by discovering novel cybersecurity, privacy, and ethical risks and proposing potential new solutions to mitigate them. XRSI, being the first such global effort, is uniquely positioned to provide impartial, practical information about XR and spatial computing related risks and opportunities to individuals, corporations, universities, government agencies, and other organizations worldwide. So with us today, I'd like to welcome April Boyd-Noronha, who is XRSI's Global Diversity and Inclusion Advisor. She has over 20 years of experience in academia and advanced technologies. And in her advisory role, she collaborates with global partners and allies to help build safe, immersive environments for all. April is a global keynote speaker and thought leader on emerging trends and the future of work, with a particular focus on equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. April is the president of the XR Coalition, a global entity formed specifically to address the need for diversity and inclusion in both the cybersecurity and XR domain. As a professor, she advocates the use of immersive technologies to advance curriculums in health information management, cybersecurity, and computer information systems. She also serves as the chief engagement strategist at the STEM Broker LLC and has advised many more boards such as the FinTech for Good and United Way. In 2018, she was named Educator of the Year by the International Consortium of Minority Cybersecurity Professionals. April is uniquely positioned to connect academia, corporations, and industry leaders with next generation talent. She is also a distinguished author who has been sharing her experience and expertise via publications and books such as The Top 5 Rules of Engagement for Parents Raising a Girl in STEM. So welcome, April. And we're also glad to welcome Kavya Pearlman, well known as the Cyber Guardian, founder and CEO of the XRSI. Kavya Pearlman is an award-winning cybersecurity professional with a deep interest in immersive and emerging technologies. She recently launched a novel XRSI Privacy and Safety Framework for the XR and spatial computing domain. Kavya is constantly exploring new technologies to solve cybersecurity challenges. She's been named one of the top cybersecurity influencers for 3 consecutive years by IFSEC Global. Kavya has previously advised Facebook on third-party security risks during the 2016 US presidential elections and worked as the head of security for the oldest virtual world, Second Life by Linden Lab. Kavya is the co-host of the immersive podcast Singularity Watch and one of the top 50 speakers in the cybersecurity industry. She has founded the XR Coalition that now focuses on diversity and inclusion and the cross-section of cybersecurity and XR. And she has also recently joined the National Small Business Association as the Technology Leadership Council advisor to help create tech policy changes at the US congressional level. So thank you both for being with us, and I'll leave the floor to you for the presentation.
Thank you. We are excited to be here. But before we dive into the safety and inclusion aspects of emerging technologies, we must understand where we are and how do we get here. We know that emerging trends calls for emerging minds.
And that's right, April. To understand where we are today, it is important to understand how technology evolves. how it impacts our digital lives, our lives digitally and in real life globally, and why it really matters. So let's take a look at a couple of the key milestone events that reflected very strongly and reminded us why privacy, data protection, and inclusion is so extremely important. So from the left, if you begin, this is 2011, when somebody brings down a 30 years old dictatorship using social media. That is a milestone event in digital technologies. And that is, my guess is when that was happening, Russians were taking notes, and then they turn around and we see the influence was similar tactics were used during US presidential election times, and not just the presidential election that took place in 2016, at which point I was over at Facebook advising Facebook for third-party security risks, and was sort of witnessing some of these, evolving challenges that come about due to these privacy issues and whatnot. But then later we learned there was Brexit that was also highly influenced by digital campaigns like this. You can pretty much see the data. I've pointed it out. And then again, we saw some of the interference being carried out during 2016. And then, that became a whole issue with Mueller report and whatnot. And then finally, what we witnessed was the day of insurrection. And so that's kind of is very interesting to point out. So let's park those thoughts that emerge out of, this massive impact. But let's talk about these emerging technologies. At XRSI, or in general, this term is starting to now gain traction. We, a lot of the people prior to XRSI had been fighting this, we call it the war of words. So when we started with XRSI, we wanted to just really put these war of words at end. So just to recap what these emerging technologies that we're going to be talking about today, we call it, sort of immersive technology, but use the umbrella term XR, which refers to extended reality. So extended reality covers virtual reality, where it provides full immersion into a digital artificial environment, creates autonomy, interaction, creates presence. Likewise, augmented reality, where you have virtual and digital overlay objects. The objects are overlaid on top of a real world environment, kind of like Instagram filters and things that you already start to see already. Mixed reality, where you can actually manipulate the environment, like moving a forklift using a head-mounted display goggle. So anyhow, as a first step, this is what XRSI did. We published taxonomy standard terms. So now these terms are becoming common language. And this is why we did it, so that people can just stop fighting the war of words and just focus on the innovation. And later on, I can, if you go to XRSI website, you can actually refer to these taxonomies. So I talked about, Cambridge Analytica being one of those milestone key events. Why? Let's take a quick look at why that is so important to understand. And here is Alexander Nix.
Where we have somewhere close to 4,000 or 5,000 data points on every adult in the United States. Finally, addressable ad technology. This is the ability to take all this offline data and to match it to drive communications. Blanket advertising. Blanket advertising, the idea that 100 million people receive the same piece of direct mail, the same television advert, the same digital advert, is dead. My children will certainly never, ever understand this concept of mass communication. Today, communication is becoming ever increasingly targeted. It's being individualized for every single person in this room. So you will no longer be receiving adverts on products and services that you don't care about. Rather, you'll only receive adverts that not only are on the products and services, or in the case of elections, issues that you care about most, but that have been nuanced in order to reflect the way you see the world. We're able to match offline data to cookies to drive digital advertising, social media banners and the like. We can obviously use this data to inform direct mail purchases. So a husband in a household can receive a piece of mail, but his wife can receive a different piece of mail, possibly even on the same issue. Most exciting of all probably is the fact that we can take this data and match it to set-top box viewing data. That's television or cable data. Every time you watch TV, the programs that you're watching are being recorded, and that information is being sent back to your cable provider. And we can match what you watch in a way that we can begin to select programs to advertise in that have the highest density of the target audience that we're trying to reach. This not only dramatically reduces the cost of your advertising, but of course improves the return on investment.
And undermines democracy. So keep that number in mind, 5,000 data points. Now let's take a look at what a VR device can do. So something like this device, this is an Oculus Rift, and it has, as you probably see because of my, camera, you could see some dots in here, which I don't see in real life, but these are just, trackers that are embedded into it. Within a 20 minutes of recording, this is a research that Stanford conducted, and this is old research. I'm pretty sure you could actually record much more data points nowadays, but over 2 million unique recordings of body language within 20 minutes of VR simulation. So think about the 5,000 data points and what we have here.
And so in the words of Avi Barziv, an esteemed colleague that I highly recommend that you all follow, the eyes are the prize. And Kavya will explain more about that in a minute. But in fact, there are some XR companies already collecting our body motion data. And this can help them study and improve the user experience. There's nothing wrong with that. But this data could also be used improperly. And by not sharing exactly what's being used or stored or protected, we'll never know.
That's right, April. And let's take a look at the capabilities that these XR devices are being equipped with. I mean, these devices, this is an augmented reality device, this is a proof of concept, and the source is Qualcomm, but this is what we're looking at: tracking and recording, like cameras, bidirectional speakers, transduced bone conduction transducers, so, sort of like building up to be some kind of a haptic feedback to be given to you, ambient light sensors, so it could work in the darkness. I mean, you name it, like EMG, EKG, all of this stuff is now more and more becoming so easy to capture. So in a way, where are we going with this? I mean, this is the intention of these type of devices, is any XR device is intended to record basically everything that we do. So replacing our, sort of glasses with these devices, we call them augmented reality devices, but, of course, we're going to use the umbrella term XR. We are really just moving to an era of constant reality capture. And this is because, there is an artificial intelligence agent that is likely to capture this and make sense of it. Think about Siri now being customized to really understand how you want to live your life, and then potentially make some good suggestions to you. But in all of this, we have now moved into the era of constant reality capture. And so when we extend reality via these XR devices and technologies, we can do so many things. It's wonderful. We can do location and navigation, which we now do with, maps at the moment. But imagine if you never really had to look at your phone this way. You could just, have your Siri direct you, and you never have to look down. So we're moving towards this, thinking about face down to like face up culture, where we could interact with a person, but at the same time, look at information that we need. Collaboration gaming is going to be big because of it. And in virtual reality, it's already kind of picking up traction. Teleportation, space sharing, outdoor 3D views, and virtual object sharing. All of that is really exciting stuff. And finally, the one thing that I would really love, actually, I've shared this with April a few times, but I'll say this again. I really want Data, and I'm going to call my AI agent Data, who will wake me up in the morning and would say, hey, good morning, Kavya. Today's weather is blah, blah, blah. And, it would make some suggestions for my dress, or, what kind of coffee, or whatever, all these things are really fascinating and wonderful, and I love them. But of course, we need to take care of so many things like safety, privacy? What are the unintended consequences? What will be the impact on our society? Suddenly we were not heads down, we're actually looking up, and now we are used to over communicating all this information. So who will own our data? Would we have transparency towards our data? Are these devices going to be expensive or not expensive? Are we going to increase the digital divide? And all of these things are super interesting to both April and I.
So even taking immersive mobile experiences to the next level requires all kinds of a collection of all kinds and types of data. So this type of data collection, though, and the processing of it is essential because it can improve head and body tracking. And that essentially then improves or provides rather a user-friendly kind of inside out 6 degrees of freedom head tracking. It also provides functionality at a world scale with capabilities to appropriately alert for things such as collision avoidance and of the such.
Exactly. And then on top of that, I mean, think about the eyes. So improved eye tracking could then provide you, automatic IPD calibration. IPD stands for interpupillary distance, which is really, really an important concept when you want to sort of adjust and match your, sort of devices to your quality and comfort. Likewise, tracking accuracy. Your field of view, all of this is really important to capture when you want to facilitate this type of experience. And this is where we start to worry about what we call inferences. Once again, last year with the launch of XRSI Framework, which we'll talk about in a moment, we established a new term. We call it the biometric inferred data. It's already being adopted and discussed at the congressional level as people are trying to, draft new laws. It is also being adopted by big tech corporations without naming them. You can just, all of them sort of, definitely are looking at these terminologies because inferences can be good and can also be bad. In case of bad inferences, imagine, because, in America, apparently insurance providers can still deny you coverage. Given that, they could, if they knew based on your inferences that your, let's say, MS is progressing. I'm not citing any research here, but there are research where you can attribute your typing patterns to how fast your MS is progressing. So if these type of inference is possible, then somebody who has access to this inferences, biometrically inferred data, could actually deny you coverage. So then the things start to become a little bit grim. But
yeah.
Go ahead, April.
No, go ahead.
So yeah, no, I just wanted to hint to, the next version, which, you and I discuss all the time, is what the future looks like.
Right. And so that is one of the exciting parts of what the XRSI is looking forward to. So let's take a look.
Oh, hey. Bring in Model 5A. Hi, everyone. Oh, hey. What do you think? I think it looks great. Let's call in Darren.
Oh, hey guys, what's up?
Darren, we were wondering, could we change the color of the upholstery?
Oh yeah, definitely. Let's see, how about blue?
Works for me. What do you guys think?
Looks good. Looks good.
And I'm going to move this slide forward. So that's really exciting, if you ask me. And this might be one of the only times that I agree with Mark Zuckerberg, but I have to say, with climate change looming and COVID still threatening our lives, we should be teleporting and not transporting. Imagine a future where children are, enjoying virtual characters, learning to play games. I know it doesn't quite sit well with a lot of people who really talk about the human interaction, but this is what is possible with software as a building material. We are literally reinventing touch. And in this case, the human touch, the human interaction, the real feeling of being there, it can actually be recreated. And that's something that's really exciting to me. I mean, think about people who may not have been able to live their lives properly because of disability or whatnot, or go to a gym, but now you can with these, you know, devices equip you to run, ski, ride bikes, like all sorts of new things that can happen. So all in all, what it really means is emerging technologies such as XR with the combination of artificial intelligence, they are already beginning to change lives.
But it's also bringing new risks along with it. That's just a part of how that cookie is going to crumble. So when you think about privacy risks, when you pick up a phone and you see AR objects, or you have your VR headset and you have the inside out tracking capabilities, every minute of your details, of those details are being tracked in your surrounding environment. So with the rise of data breaches and hacking, security is at stake. And we'll talk about that in detail shortly. But there used to be a saying that seeing is believing. But in the era of deep fake and propaganda, and you know, where did big tech promote these, and where big tech promotes these VR platforms, you know, where are the tools to defy this reality? Can we trust what we see and experience? That becomes the question.
Exactly. And remember the number of data points that I told you about, 5,000 data points, and now compare it with the 2 million data points. Well, with over 2 million data points collected in just 20 minutes, we have to wonder, what could next Cambridge Analytica look like? But before we wonder, let's take a look at what are the impacts and what exactly happened with it.
All of your interactions, your credit card swipes, web searches, locations, likes, they're all collected in real time into a $1 trillion a year industry.
The real game changer was Cambridge Analytica. They worked for the Trump campaign and for the Brexit campaign. They started using information warfare.
Cambridge Analytica claimed to have 5,000 data points on every American voter.
I started tracking down all these Cambridge Analytica ex-employees.
Someone else that you should be calling to committee is Brittany Kaiser.
Brittany Kaiser, once a key player inside Cambridge Analytica, casting herself as a whistleblower.
The reason why Google and Facebook are the most powerful companies in the world is because last year data surpassed oil in value. Data is the most valuable asset on Earth. We targeted those whose minds we thought we could change until they saw the world the way we wanted them to. I do know that your targeting tool was considered a weapon.
There is the possibility that the American public have been experimented on.
This is becoming a criminal matter. When people see the extent of the surveillance, I think
they're going to be shocked. And that is shocking to me, that now we are going to give them not just 5,000 data points on each American, but our entire lives, our dreams, our sophisticated thoughts that, you know, turn into actions that turn into realities. But, you know, it's endless.
And so herein lies the question, what can we do to mitigate these risks? As you can see from the screen, are regulations the answer? Well, I have to admit that there are no easy answers, because as we all know, regulations, you know, come late sometime, and in most cases, they just don't have enough technical grounds to truly protect humans. So this is where XRSI comes in.
And so we help build safe and inclusive emerging technologies. Rui earlier gave you an explanation of what we do, but I just want to play this video for, you know, sort of capturing that it is not just about the technologies that are being developed right now. It's really mostly about what are the risks to human lives, to human essence. And so I'll just play this video for that matter.
Is it possible for a team to succeed in their research and development plans without considering the implications of trust, privacy, inclusion, and safety. This is a fundamental question of my mission to support individuals, corporations, universities, and government entities. We want them to reach their goals of developing emergent tech while making sure that safe and inclusive experiences are at the forefront of every key decisions they make. My name is Kavya Pearlman, and I believe that it is critical for research and development teams to keep that question in mind. This is why I founded XR Safety Initiative. We believe in the potential of XR, VR, AR, and AI technologies as a driving force of good in the modern age. But we also recognize the risks and threats that reveal themselves through these tools. Our desire is to mitigate those risks. We do this by bringing together the brightest minds who have a passion for emerging technologies to work together towards these pillars of our research. The future is bold, unknown, and sometimes a little scary. But as we emphasize the prominence of this question and deliver resources that keep it in front of the eyes of the world's leaders in XR, we will find a future that is safe, secure, and full of hope.
Let's see if it will let me move forward. Cool. So this is exactly why we got busy building solutions. So building out information security, governance, and privacy framework. This is an effort that, version 1.0 was launched in September 2020. And now we are, doing the second iteration of this framework, which is the version 1.1. We took the community feedback all the way up to 30th of April, for which Berkeley University was also invited. And I hope that Berkeley University and along with other universities, the University of Michigan is already on board and Georgia Tech is already on board. So I urge Berkeley University, now that I have a chance, to actually come be part of this effort.
And so to sum it up, we have 4 key focal areas that we assessed, and that include to assess, inform, manage, and prevent. And then, as Kavya mentioned, we invited the community in as well to look at 14 corresponding functions. So keep in mind that this work is ongoing and very collaborative. And it looks at these functions and that they are evolving and expanding just as technologies do as well.
Exactly. And so what is this XRSI framework? And let me just make sure that I am presenting on the full screen mode. So this framework has 4 focus areas, 14 functions, which, by the way, I know for sure it's going to change, because this was the 14 functions were in version 1.0. And now with the work, we've actually condensed them quite a bit and added a lot more research around a lot of these technologies that are intersecting. And I'll talk about those technologies in a moment. So currently, I think I'm looking at probably 80 something controls, but we'll see how that works out, because a lot of this work is still ongoing. But yeah, it takes in consideration these risks that essentially, financial risk, informational risk, societal risk, risk to humans, risk to, all these other legal risk in whichever jurisdiction you might be operating. All of that starts to come together. And finally, and I still have this slide from version 1.0. So, but as I said, if you want to, because the nature of this framework is so iterative, that if you want to get involved, there will be a next iteration. And in fact, what's happening now is that a lot of the industries have practically demanded that we focus in on their scope. So one of the scope that we're going to be focusing on as a next iteration is medical XR. Another one is child safety, because there is a huge urgency around the impact to children. And we'll talk about that as well in a minute. But yeah, it's a huge significant step, and it's not just about XR. It's, we have to keep an eye on other technologies as well. And when we talk about these other technologies, I'm going to play this video. It doesn't have any sound or anything. So what you're seeing right now is a demo version of, this is called Notion device. I've actually spoken with the CEO a couple of times, Alex Castillo, who made this demo video where, you know, this person is literally just popping these augmented reality artwork using his brain. So this device actually captures non-invasively your brain waves and allows it to then create augmented reality objects. So this is where we were about a couple of months ago. And just about last week, Brown University has been able to capture non-invasively the entire spectrum of the brain. So that is now a very, very interesting intersection. And I'm closely looking at how that will change how we you know, do these XR technologies, or what impact it has on XR. Let's take a look at spatial audio and XR. And this is just a quick clip that I want to play from Facebook Reality Lab, because they're doing a lot of experimentation related to spatial audio, which is very, very important element when you try to create immersion or presence or extend your realities for that matter. Let's take a look.
Imagine your brain hears my voice and believes that I'm right there with you. That's the magic of audio presence. It is something the audio research team here at Facebook Reality Labs is building for future AR glasses and VR headsets. Vamos a repasar, Sebastián. So when Tom is speaking to me, hi, blah, blah, blah. The sound hits one of my ears just before the other one. Also, the volume is slightly different in each ear. We call this interaural time and level differences. On top of that, sound waves also interact with the environment, bouncing off the walls before making it into your ear. And the shape of the ear changes how every one of us hears sound. No two people's ears are exactly alike. By combining all these elements, we've implemented some cool systems that allow us to overcome these challenges and create a feeling of real audio presence. This is an actual demo where a person tries to guess which sounds are coming from the loudspeakers in the room and which sounds are actually virtual, reproduced by their headphones.
It's so impossible to tell. I don't know what the difference is.
I got tricked. It was very difficult. A lot of it felt like guessing.
And then there is the ear problem, finding each person's head-related transfer function, or HRTF. That is what this room is actually for. We track how sound hits your ear so that we can recreate exactly how you hear. It's a state-of-the-art anechoic chamber. But it's not exactly scalable. So what we're trying for is an algorithm that can find your personal HRTF from a photograph. Y estamos muy cerca. But these are only pieces of a larger puzzle. Dozens of other technologies need to fall into.
So imagine this, being able to identify the unique shape. In fact, it was so profound to me that you can actually identify a person based on the shape of your ear, because it's unique for every human being. That's kind of fascinating. But you remember how it started with the like? This is how it's going. Spatial audio and all kinds of sophisticated data. Now that gets into 5G, which is basically, you know, a much more sophisticated version of what network looks like these days, because we talk about 4G, but 5G provides you even more larger bandwidth, easier processing of data. So it is absolutely going to impact augmented reality. I'm going to just play a quick video. This is from the opening day of 2019 KBO season on Saturday, March 23rd. SK Telecom brought this mythical like dragon animal into a 5G equipped dome, like a park. And let's take a look. So just in the interest of time, 5G is going to, that's another technology that has a massive impact on extended realities. And it's another emerging technology that we have to keep an eye on, because, I mean, this is from 2019. Some research that I'm adding here on the side, these are some of the risks that come along, because, you know, when it comes to this rapid, endless real-time network, it's really hard to figure out if there is a attacker, like a cyber attacker or a malicious element is infiltrating your system. So protecting the integrity and availability of these systems is going to be really, really important. What if somebody's spying on your data? So that's another something that, we have to think about these issues, and we are looking at all the stuff that happens, because protecting human privacy has never been more important.
And so think of it like this: with the evolution of the emerging technologies, privacy is like oxygen. It's invisible and easy to ignore until it's taken away.
So well said. And then, we start to look into the safety aspects of it. And I just want to point out why we say safety and not just security is because, and I'll explain a little bit, but security is thus far has stayed limited to what we call the network, the devices. But when it comes to extended reality and emerging realities, our entire human essence is at stake. And let me go through a couple of slides and you'll start to see why safety and not just security. So briefly, I'm going to touch on these cyber virtual reality attacks. In the interest of time, I encourage you to review this research. This research comes from one of our senior advisors, who is also an assistant dean at the University of New Haven. So what they did and discovered is all kind of mentioned in this research, but I'm going to kind of zip through it a little bit. But before I do, I want to show you this video where myself and another one of our board members, Marco Maniano, we were at Augmented World Expo in 2019 when we could actually travel together and meet in person with conferences and people. So here is what happens in VR or AR. Your attack surface is now your living room or wherever you're playing. So that was just a quick, quick way to show you that, your surroundings, what is the impact on your brain, all of this start to come in question, and that becomes like a threat surface. So if you look at this sort of a orange line, it shows you the threat surface is no longer just databases or applications or the computer device. It is now your entire living room. And so what they did is they kind of exploited some of these applications and were able to attribute to some new type of cyber attacks where you could not only move a person without their permission, you could overlay a bunch of the other components on top of this. You could chaperone, drop down the safety boundaries, hijack the camera. They called it tracker attack. And again, I'm sourcing this research. You're welcome to dive deeper into it. In the interest of time, I'm going to run through it, but chaperone attack, human joystick attack. So you see this green dot. They were able to move the person while the person was supposed to be here, but without their knowledge, gradually they walked all the way across the room. So if you combine that with, overlay attack, like somebody could just really take over your devices and say, hey, unless you give me X Bitcoins, I'm not going to let it up. And so that leads to, what we need to protect is we need to protect the data. People, if, in social environment, when they are interacting with each other, then we need to protect the input, the interaction. If, somebody could just share a link and pop your device that way. And we need to protect the device itself because, of course, these devices are going to be vulnerable to hacking and whatnot.
So in February of 2020, we took a step back and thought, how else can we address these issues? And so the Cyberstar Coalition was launched as a global nonprofit collaborative. And so we were very intentional with the fact that it needed to have a global presence. And so our presence is felt in areas such as Japan with our founding members, in UK and India and Africa, because we knew, as I mentioned before, that emerging trends calls for emerging mindsets. And so with us being a global D&I coalition that focuses on CyberXR and cybersecurity and XR, we know that we're uniquely positioned to empower and strengthen our communities as we help build solutions, establish baseline standards, resolve barriers to access, focus on that human-centric XR responsibility in R&D, and create public awareness as well. And in that, you can see here that in our first standards guide that we produced, It specifically focused on 4 pillars, not the all in all, but we started with accessibility, inclusion, ethics, and safety. And let's dig a little deeper with the concept of ethics in VR. I was on a panel last year and I was asked, does discrimination continue in virtual reality? And the answer is yes. If it happens in the real world, there is absolutely that it can happen in XR. And why is that? And I believe that many people in VR forget that behind that avatar is a real person. So yes, that impact in virtual reality can be just as personal or detrimental even in VR. And then when we look at real world threats in VR, I once had a fellow female panelist ask or explain why she rarely entered into VR as herself, her true self. And her true self being that as of an African-American female. And she actively chooses this technique because it lessens the chance of an inappropriate experience. And I want that to sink in. So for many historically marginalized populations, we may not have the choice to just enter a realm as we are, as our authentic self. And then that therefore then does not create an inclusive and diverse environment. But yes.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna zip through it, but you know, sure. There is this other element that is also highlighted. With this much data collection, we're about to cross a point where we may be able to upload ourselves as well. We may not be quite there yet, but we're moving fast towards such a point of singularity, as we like to call it at XRSI. But when that happens, and now, at least right now, what's happening, you guys probably saw this, where, you know, Robert Kardashian was talking to Kim Kardashian through holographic.
The most genius man in the whole world, Kanye West.
So I wonder then, you know, does that mean that an older president might endorse a newer president in a holographic form? And who gives consent? Do we really want to just live forever? Like, all these ethical questions start to emerge. And the one thing that I want to point out, though, is this is exactly why we are doing this. We're taking this initiative not just at, like, you know, locally, but globally with every possible entity. So when the new administration came into the White House, we actually compiled our recommendations related to XR and spatial computing, urging them to pay a little better focus to provide some kind of a regulatory framework. And these conversations take time, materializing that take time. But in the meantime, we are providing tons of resources through our website. This is a guide that I'm pointing out to. It's it's meant for artists, but it's meant for anyone who wants to just maintain a good cyber hygiene or wants to use extended reality in some fashion or form. You can go download this guide and it will help you figure out what all the privacy and safety consideration that you should take in mind. I also want to point out our Medical XR Advisory Council. So this is just, you know, I don't know how I end up with these amazing smart people. Some of them are just so remarkable. They've been doing surgery. They're neuroscientists, neurosurgeons for like over 30 years. They use VR to perform surgeries or augmented reality now. And it's just fascinating. So all of this is just what we do. And more than that, actually, last December, 2020, during the pandemic, we actually launched a child safety initiative. And I just, you know, it just so happens we had the vision to know that this is an issue. And now this exact issue of child safety in extended reality is being discussed at the congressional level, where we get to take a part into those conversations and hopefully provide some sort of guidance. And if you don't know where to begin, the very first and easy place to begin is with awareness. So Ready Hacker One, that's our media platform, because we knew that we needed a platform that people can trust. So this is a platform that you know, we are actively establishing, being a platform news that you can trust. And with that, I just want to say thank you for all the patience and all the time. I'm so glad we left about 10 minutes in the whole thing, and I knew I zipped through a lot of it, but we are happy to answer any questions you may have at this time. And thank you, April. It's so fun to share stage with you.
Right. Thank you, Kavya.
Hi, April, Kavya. Excellent work. I'm just wondering what kind of obstacles or is there hesitation to adopt any of this, or does do developers or people of solutions, are they even aware of this, that they can refer to this information, and just trying to get some feedback on the awareness of it.
Right. That's a really good question. Do they even know that we exist? In fact, that is somewhat of a burden upon us a little bit, but it is also upon everyone. So I encourage people who encounter XRSI, and anytime VR, AR, and extended reality is mentioned, I encourage them to point them to our website. But what we're doing now, understanding that people may not be aware of our existence, that we are a standard developing organization. We sit right next to UL that makes like 3 billion a year, and we're just like a tiny little nonprofit, but we do all this amazing work. So what we're gonna do, starting this particular framework, we're launching it in May, the version 1.1, is we're gonna do an outreach campaign where most importantly, we want to inform data protection agencies that this exists. We want to inform all the global governments, even if they don't know what VR/AR is, at some point they're going to need to know, and they're going to need to have the guidance how to put the laws together. United States government thankfully already knows, so they're already in contact with us. European Commission already knows. There is an AI subgroup that we met in 2019. So these are just like recurring, ongoing efforts, and this is part of our effort is to reach out to universities. So in 2020, I gave a presentation at University of Michigan. It was in person. I met with a lot of students and a lot of their faculty, but this is the effort that we need to do. We need to actually get ourselves out there and tell people that we exist, and this is what we are here to do. So I just want to, thank University, Dayon and University of Berkeley for the opportunity, because this is an important piece that people need to know that this is actually a challenge that we're trying to solve, and we're trying to help them innovate. We're not trying to be the barrier, we're trying to eliminate the barriers. So we'll continue to do that. If you have other suggestions, Joseph, I would love to, or if you know someone that we should connect with, I would love to.
Well, there's also, there's the concept of once, you guys are building the framework, and awareness is huge, and you start small, start slow, and more people. It sounds like you guys are on track. You've got a lot of good people working it. I'm just wondering if it's kind of a, hey, I went through the XRSI criteria or something like that, where you had your the awareness and form, or I forget the one slide, but if you create and more people are aware of it, and that gets propagated, and that can differentiate products. That can be a differentiator. Whereas that if I have to make a choice between one or two products, and I see something has gone through, the CyberXI, it's like, well, that's maybe something that is, or the XRSI, that's something that I may prefer over something that hasn't. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're bringing up such a great point. In fact, I spoke with this organization in India. They did a 7,000 human subject study around a privacy policy and the rating system. And so based off of that study, the study suggested that if you have some kind of rating system, people tend to trust more. So in order to mitigate that in XR, we are actively working on establishing a rating system that will go through our rigorous assessment process. So at the moment, we're doing it for higher education, and University of Michigan, Georgia Tech, University of Stanford. These universities are leading this effort, but eventually the next iteration is going to be for medical XR. So then we're going to focus way more on safety and abide by FDA stuff. And then we will do this for child safety. There has never been a core framework for children's safety, and we got to do this. So that is exactly the direction we're going to. And because a lot of the research suggests, along with your personal opinion too, is that this is the only way we're going to be able to maintain and establish trust.
Very, very cool. Nice work. Good. And, you know, you need a lot of energy for that too, as well, to start something from, from scratch like that. So that's very well. I'll follow you guys. I hope things go well, and where I can, maybe leverage you or use you. I'm going
Absolutely.
I will follow up.
Absolutely. We are at your service, and that's all we want to do. We never want to build these worlds. We want to help build safe worlds.
Yeah. So good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Kavya, I have a question. Thank you, first of all. Excellent, brilliant presentation. So so one of my favorite online animes is Sword Art Online. And in that, you actually can get trapped in the game. So from what you've said, this sci-fi fictionalized world looks like it could be a reality. You could be hacked and be trapped in the game. So while you're in a VR experience, you may not ever be able to exit from it unless you pay the ransom. Is that something conceivable?
It is conceivable. It sounds like an episode of Black Mirror, and it is actually an episode of Black Mirror where they're all stuck in a game. So right now these devices are being invented. What we know that is a possibility, that somebody could actually get trapped in an experience. And being trapped, especially as a children, think about it as a children. If you're trapped in an experience that has a lot of spiders coming at you, let's say somebody did a cyber attack, or somebody just threw you in that experience and you're strapped to it, and maybe somebody held your hand, like this could turn into a form of torture and whatnot. But at least for the children's sake, one of the risks, as you mentioned, that's the risk. We want to demand the hardware providers to provide a kill switch. And because this can be done through hardware providers. So talking to Qualcomm makes sense, right? Talking to all these other microchip providers, because they have to. Talking to Facebook makes sense. Apple has to provide that kill switch, and not only just the kill switch, what about turning down the reality? Like, what if I'm in an extended reality environment? A lot of things are going on. How do I actually check in with this hyper real reality? How do I check in? What's my base reality? So I need a button as a child that brings me back to my base reality, because I guarantee you 10 years from now, kids are going to be like, Mommy, dolphins can fly. And mommy's going to be debating with the kid that no, baby, this is augmented reality. And the seeing is no longer believing. And that's why all these risks are so real. We have to anticipate them. And this is what we think about all day and night long. This is April and I, this is our lives.
Brilliant. Thank you. Yes.
You're welcome. And I'm sure April could, talk about all these impact that, underprivileged minorities. I mean, this is what April is essentially every time doing. We're solving these issues, but she's constantly injecting the narrative of like what it means to be an underprivileged person, or what it means to be a person who doesn't look like you, just different, And so that's also seriously very, very important. I'm so glad.
And the impact and the importance of diverse of thought, because if we are in that space with the developers or with those that are producing the next best great thing, then we could possibly steer them in the correct way, reminding them that what is the human impact of this next best great idea or product.
Exactly. April, you wonder, right? What if this device was invented by a hijabi woman? It would be much, much better, right? Like it would at least be like something that I could use. So exactly what you said, like, the people that you employ or the people that create these realities, they have to look like us. They really do have to, because otherwise I don't expect a tech bro to understand what it's like to be a hijabi woman, to put on a VR headset. It just can't. They don't know. And that's why they create this POS, but it is what it is. I hope it gets better.
Hi, my name is Jisoo. I'm a PhD student at the School of Information. I do work around privacy, security, and safety as well. Some of my partners and I, we are developing a framework as well, thinking it's not for XR, but thinking about specific values and ways to be inclusive in technology design processes in general. And I guess my question for y'all is, I guess, how do you envision this framework? I haven't read through it, so thank you for the link. How do you envision this framework to be incorporated? At which stage of the process, specifically, especially like product lifecycle? And then how are you planning to like track the impact of your framework? I think
that's phenomenal.
Those are difficult questions, but
no, this is phenomenal. So it's quite amazing that someone like yourself actually engaged with us, also a student at University of Michigan. And together with, his name is Josh Tucker, we actually set out some criterias, and he's actively analyzing the impact and the effectiveness of XRSI privacy and safety framework. So we have a actual research that is going to continuously and forever going to monitor and measure the impact and effectiveness of this. And what that methodology is, I could totally connect you with Josh, and he would love to share. He's actually currently interviewing a lot of people because we're, reiterating the first time. So he wants to understand all of that. But I'm also curious about your work. So, we take in research from all sorts of research avenues. We have research coming in from NHS. We have research coming in from Government of Australia. So if you have something that you're building, and if you think that it aligns with any aspects of our privacy safety challenges, then I would love for you to, just use my information, and I would exchange some of the knowledge that we got going on, and would love to take a look at your work as well.
That's great. Yeah. So our framework focuses a lot on features specifically. So a particular technology's features, so that we're not constantly kind of recreating the cycle and cross-industry collaboration against certain types of abuses that are happening. So, yeah. I could talk about it more next time, but yeah, I would love to connect.
No, we should totally talk, because this is so consistent with what we're doing. Is when we do the risk assessment in our framework, we're also, just like you said, it's hard to reiterate, we're also focusing on functionalities and features, because you can keep adding like hand tracking. It doesn't change the entire product, but you still need to worry about it. So we have a lot to discuss, but we can continue offline. Thank you, Jisoo.
Thank you both.
And Dayan, thank you for extending the session just a little bit so everybody could get a chance to ask questions. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Kavya and April, to have stayed a little longer with us. I guess we can start wrapping up. So yes, just be mindful that there are some contact infos shared in the chat, and we're glad that we could facilitate these connections, and we really hope that it's that this webinar was useful for everyone. Thank you again, April and Kavya, for your very interesting and insightful presentation, and thank you for all of you who attended this webinar. We hope that you found it instructive, and yeah, I guess we can start wrapping up, and thank you all for being there.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and have a wonderful day, all of you.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you.